truer statement has never been made. Almost every time that you look at the Pusser legend, we find that it is embellished and dramatized. Here's a good example from the movie Walking Tall, which many people believe is a true story.
3 years in the Marine Corps, 5 years in the ring. He has to come home to get half killed.
Now that was a perfect example of how we reconstruct the past. In the movie, Pauline said that Buford was in the Marine Corps for 3 years. Let's take a look at his discharge papers and find the truth. Buford's 214, his discharge papers, contains a lot of information. I'm going to break this down for you so you can understand it. At the top of the 214, it gives Buford's name. Next, it shows that he is in recruit training at Parris Island in South Carolina. This shows his date of induction into the Marine Corps. Of course, this shows us that the information that Buford gave us thus far is true. But let's look forward into the reason he left the Marines. As we continue to look at Buford's 214, we see that he was discharged for medical reasons. We also learned that he was discharged from recruit training on November 14th, 1956. Now, what's so important to note here is that while Buford did enlist in the Marine Corps, he never really was a Marine, and here's the reason why. Now let's break this statement down into 3 separate parts so we'll thoroughly understand it. A recruit is not considered a Marine until they complete their recruit training. Now that's only part of the requirements. There's more. And pass the crucible, which is the final test at the end of boot camp. And the statement ends with, only then do they officially earn the title of Marine. So, by definition, Eord Pusser was never a Marine. He was only a recruit. Now, I know a lot of you that have served in the Marines back in those days are going to come out and say, now, wait a second. You had to get in 10 weeks of training to be a Marine. Well, Buford was there for almost 14 weeks, but yet you're saying he was not a Marine. And then you're going to tell me to look at the 214 again and see what it says about the time that he served. So let's do that. Here once again is Buford's 214. Now let's take a close look at the number of days that he had in basic training. Here we see that he was in recruit training for 3 months and 6 days. Now, of course, when you look at a calendar, some will argue that Buford served just shy of 100 days, and therefore he met the qualifications of having been in the Marines for 10 weeks. Be sure and subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll get notifications of new videos when they're released. Remember the 3 qualifiers that we discussed to become a Marine? It appears that Buford met the first one. After all, he did complete basic training. However, did he pass the crucible? And that is the reason that he was there an additional 3 weeks. Okay, let's say that Buford was there for 10 weeks. He's completed his basic training time. But then he takes that test, the crucible. And what happens if you fail that? Marine Corps regulations suggest that if a recruit fails the crucible, He'll be given the opportunity to go through boot camp again, retake the crucible in order to become a Marine. Apparently, Buford didn't make it all the way through his second boot camp. So it appears that Buford Pusser left the Marine Corps, most likely with the title of recruit and not Marine. In last week's video, I made a mistake. I'm human. I said that Buford left the Marine Corps because of asthma. But then, really, how do we know that he had asthma? That he didn't just fail? He wasn't capable of doing what a Marine is required to do. Well, I got to thinking about that. There's nothing in the documents that show that he had asthma. And I started asking myself, where did we get that piece of information? And then it dawned on me. W.R. Morse. Now, when we look back into Buford's past, we don't find any information where it indicates that Buford suffered from asthma in his high school athletics, where he played both football and basketball. Also, when you think forward, you realize that he was a professional wrestler, something that is extremely physical, and it didn't seem to bother him then either. Did Buford just tell W.R. Morse this as a means of kind of erasing his stained history as trying to be a Marine? Now, for the movie Walking Tall, Buford served as a technical consultant, telling directors and producers what was correct, what was wrong, and yet he allowed them to portray him as having been in the Marines for 3 years. You remember Pauline standing there with those bloodied clothes in her hands saying, 3 years in the Marines, 5 years in wrestling, and he has to come home to get half killed. Why would he do that? That is stolen valor. Now, each of us may have someone we know or related to that were maimed or wounded in a war that we've been in. And you have to wonder what it would make them feel like to find out that Buford claimed to be a Marine when he never was. How hurtful can that be to people that may never walk again, may have lost their eyesight, may have lost a limb? Then you have to consider the true heroes, the ones who never made it home, the ones who made it home in a casket. And then you have to think about their grieving loved ones, moms, dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters, spouses who lost someone. I guess what I'm saying here is each of us are going to have to decide for ourselves how we feel about Buford claiming to have been a Marine. Was he justified or was he not? If he wasn't, I do suggest that it's a slap in the face to every person who has served, every person who was wounded, every person who died, their family members. So you have to consider all that. I don't think a legend is worth making up such a lie about your own personal history. At any rate, I'll leave it with that. You can decide. And until next time, just remember, truth has no agenda.